Fast X, the 10th installment in the long-running Fast and Furious franchise, brought together a blend of franchise veterans and high-profile newcomers, each contributing uniquely to the movie's dynamic. The cast of Fast X played a significant role not only in driving the story forward, but also in defining the emotional and action-packed tone that fans have come to expect. This page delves into the careers of the main actors, their roles in Fast X, what they brought to the production, and how the film influenced their professional trajectories. Vin Diesel once again returned as Dominic Toretto, the patriarchal figure of the Fast franchise and its emotional and narrative anchor. Diesel, who had been involved in the series since its inception in 2001, continued to embody the themes of loyalty, family, and sacrifice through his portrayal. Before Fast and Furious, Diesel had gained recognition in films such as Pitch Black and The Iron Giant, but it was the Fast franchise that solidified his status as a global action star. His performance in Fast X showed a slightly more introspective and vulnerable Dom, particularly in his relationship with his son and the emotional baggage he carries from past confrontations. The film allowed Diesel to explore deeper emotional territory while still delivering the hard-hitting physical performance fans expect. Fast X reinforced Diesel's position as a producer and lead actor capable of maintaining continuity in a sprawling narrative universe. Jason Momoa made his franchise debut as the flamboyant and menacing Dante Reyes, a villain unlike any the series had seen before. Momoa, best known for his roles as Aquaman in the DC Extended Universe and Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones, brought a wild, theatrical energy to Dante. His character was not only dangerous but also charismatic and unpredictable, a stark contrast to the more stoic villains of earlier films. Momoa's performance was widely praised for its uniqueness and the way it injected fresh life into the series. It allowed him to showcase his range, combining humor, chaos, and menace in one role. The part also marked a departure from the more heroic or noble roles he had previously taken on, broadening his acting profile and demonstrating his ability to carry a major action franchise in both protagonist and antagonist roles. Michelle Rodriguez reprised her role as Letty Ortiz, continuing her arc as Dom's equally fearless partner. Rodriguez, who had established herself in earlier works like Girl Fight and Resident Evil, has always portrayed Letty as strong-willed, emotionally complex, and fiercely loyal. In Fast X, Letty is given more independence and a subplot that allows her to act outside of Dom's immediate shadow, deepening her character's agency. This evolution underscored Rodriguez's commitment to playing women who are tough yet nuanced, and it strengthened her reputation as one of the few long-standing female action stars who has maintained relevance and consistency over multiple decades. Her role in Fast X reinforced the importance of her presence in the franchise, not merely as a supporting character, but as an integral part of its core. Tyrese Gibson returned as Roman Pierce, delivering comic relief with heart. Gibson, who transitioned from music to acting in the early 2000s, had built a reputation for blending humor and action in a way that feels organic to the Fast universe. In Fast X, Roman's leadership is tested, and while the comedic elements remain, the film also nudges his character toward maturity and responsibility. This growth gave Gibson more dramatic material to work with than in previous entries, showcasing an often underappreciated emotional range. His continued presence in the franchise highlighted his importance as part of the ensemble dynamic, balancing levity with occasional sincerity. Ludacris, known off-screen as Chris Bridges, also returned as Tej Parker, the tech-savvy and cool-headed member of the crew. Much like Gibson, Ludacris successfully transitioned from music to acting and has been a staple in the series since Too Fast, Too Furious. In Fast X, Tej plays a crucial role in orchestrating complex plans and solving high-stakes problems under pressure. His chemistry with Gibson's Roman remains a fan favorite, and their dynamic continues to provide a balance of humor and intelligence. Bridges' consistent portrayal of Tej has proven his ability to maintain a stable acting career while still engaging in music and business ventures. Jordana Brewster reprised her role as Mia Toretto, Dom's sister and the wife of Brian O'Connor, played by the late Paul Walker. While her role was more limited compared to earlier entries, Brewster's presence helped ground the film emotionally and maintain continuity. Brewster had earlier established herself with dramatic and romantic roles in films like The Faculty and The Invisible Circus, but her most notable success remains tied to the Fast franchise. Her character in Fast X reflects a maternal strength and quiet resilience, emphasizing the ongoing importance of family within the story. While not a central focus of the film, Mia's appearance reaffirms her connection to the series' emotional roots. Nathalie Emmanuel as Ramsay continued to expand the technical expertise of the crew. Emmanuel, who gained international attention through her role as Missandei in Game of Thrones, brought intelligence and a sense of purpose to Ramsay, the team's hacking specialist. Fast X gave her more screen time to showcase her skills in both action sequences and emotional moments, highlighting her evolution from a background support character to a more central figure. Emmanuel's work in Fast X demonstrated her ability to hold her own in a franchise dominated by high-octane action and larger-than-life personalities. John Cena returned as Jacob Toretto, Dom's younger brother, introduced in F9. Cena, previously best known as a WWE superstar and for comedic roles in films like Blockers and Trainwreck, expanded his dramatic range in Fast X. In this film, Jacob is portrayed with greater emotional depth, particularly in scenes involving Dom's son. His transformation from antagonist to protector was convincingly portrayed, showcasing Cena's growing versatility as an actor. His continued involvement in the franchise signaled Hollywood's increasing recognition of his talents beyond wrestling and lighthearted roles. Brie Larson joined the franchise as Tess, a covert operative with personal ties to Mr. Nobody. Larson, an Academy Award-winning actress for her performance in Room, is also known for her portrayal of Captain Marvel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Her addition to Fast X brought prestige and star power, but also a groundedness and strategic sensibility to the film. Tess is portrayed as intelligent, morally driven, and unafraid to challenge authority. Larson's involvement added a layer of sophistication to the narrative and hinted at larger plot developments in future installments. The Fast and Furious franchise has always existed at the crossroads of pop culture, high-octane action, and multicultural representation. By the time Fast X premiered in 2023, the series had evolved from a niche street racing saga to a global cinematic phenomenon. The cultural impact and historical significance of Fast X in particular cannot be viewed in isolation but rather as a culmination of decades of storytelling, franchise expansion, and shifts in societal attitudes. The film arrived not just as another sequel, but as a cultural milestone that both reflected and influenced the world around it. Fast X was released into a world where the concept of family had grown more fluid, diverse, and inclusive. The franchise's long-standing emphasis on chosen family over biological ties had always struck a chord, but Fast X pushed this theme further. In doing so, it resonated with audiences who found themselves navigating an increasingly fragmented yet interconnected world. Dom's evolving role as a father, mentor, and leader mirrored many modern struggles about responsibility, legacy, and identity. For fans who had grown up with the series, Fast X acted as a generational mirror, reflecting back their own growth, losses, and values. It was no longer just about the thrill of fast cars and explosions. It was about what it means to protect those you love, even when the world is constantly falling apart. Fast X also made a statement about the shifting nature of heroism in contemporary culture. Traditional action heroes were often stoic, hypermasculine, and emotionally closed off. But Fast X offered a more emotionally accessible version of the hero. Dominic Toretto, though still the strong, silent type, displayed vulnerability, paternal warmth, and a reflective inner life. This change reflected broader shifts in pop culture, where audiences began to demand multidimensional characters and stories that explored emotional truth alongside spectacle. From a global standpoint, the film's multicultural and multilingual cast continued to set an industry standard for diversity. Characters of different ethnicities, nationalities, and backgrounds operated not as sidekicks or stereotypes, but as integral parts of the main ensemble. Fast X, like its predecessors, emphasized global unity through its casting and locations, implicitly suggesting that the threats the world faces, be they emotional, physical, or moral, can only be met through cooperation, inclusion, and mutual respect. This unspoken philosophy mirrored the real-world challenges of the 2020s, particularly as societies dealt with political polarization, pandemics, and the climate crisis. The idea of working together across borders and backgrounds had never felt more timely. Memes and viral content also played a significant role in cementing Fast X's cultural presence. Even before its release, memes about family, Vin Diesel's gravelly voice, and the franchise's ever-expanding physics-defying stunts dominated social media. The franchise became both a target of parody and a source of genuine affection. The fact that Fast X was self-aware, sometimes playing into these expectations with a wink, only made it more endearing to fans. This unique blend of sincerity and camp allowed the film to inhabit a rare cultural space, one that was both ridiculous and revered. Fast X was also referenced across media platforms. Late-night shows, online commentators, and content creators used the film as a talking point or a metaphor for escalating stakes in their own fields. The phrase, "it's going full Fast X," became shorthand for anything that escalated beyond reasonable limits. Whether people were talking about sports, politics, or technology, invoking the name of Fast X was a way to describe intensity, extremity, or the point of no return. It was no longer just a film. It had become linguistic shorthand in the cultural lexicon. Fashion and music were not left untouched either. The film's style, particularly its mix of streetwear, tactical gear, and luxury clothing, continued to influence trends in global youth fashion. Collaborations with fashion brands and sneaker companies followed, inspired by the aesthetics of the characters. In music, the soundtrack, which combined reggaeton, hip-hop, EDM, and Latin trap, mirrored the increasingly genre-blending tastes of younger audiences. Songs from the film climbed charts not only due to musical quality, but because they symbolized a cultural affiliation with the fast lifestyle: bold, global, emotional, and fierce. On a more symbolic level, Fast X offered commentary on the nature of legacy and the pressure to sustain relevance in a rapidly changing world. The film's very existence, being the 10th installment in a 20-plus-year-old franchise, posed questions about storytelling longevity, audience loyalty, and the cycles of media consumption. In many ways, Fast X served as a case study in how a franchise could reinvent itself without losing its core identity. Its ability to keep reinventing while remaining familiar was a reflection of modern pop culture's own struggle to balance nostalgia with innovation. Politically, the film didn't take overt stances, but it did reflect contemporary anxieties around surveillance, autonomy, and power. The villain's manipulation of digital systems and government structures paralleled real-world concerns about cybersecurity, authoritarianism, and the fragility of modern infrastructures. Viewers may not have consciously connected these dots, but the undercurrents were there, feeding into broader societal fears and questions. The Fast crew, as always, stood for individual resistance against overwhelming systems, a metaphor that resonated deeply in a time where many felt powerless against political and economic forces. Moreover, Fast X's cultural importance also lies in how it brought people together across generations. Parents who had watched the original films in the early 2000s were now watching Fast X with their children. The film became a bridge across age gaps, ethnicities, and countries. The franchise's message, that people from different backgrounds can form unbreakable bonds, carried a universal appeal that transcended language and geography. From an industry perspective, Fast X stood as a symbol of blockbuster resilience. At a time when many major studios were scaling back theatrical releases in favor of streaming, Fast X represented a commitment to the cinematic experience. The film's massive set pieces, global location shoots, and epic scope were designed for the big screen, and audiences responded by showing up in droves. The film became a rallying cry for those who believed in the power of theaters, collective movie watching, and the irreplaceable magic of seeing action unfold on a massive screen with surround sound. In educational and academic circles, the Fast and Furious franchise began to attract more scholarly attention, with Fast X being seen as a rich text for discussions around masculinity, globalization, and cinematic mythology. Professors used the film to illustrate the evolution of action cinema, while students wrote theses on the series' racial politics, representations of gender, and narrative structure. What had once been dismissed as popcorn entertainment was now being seriously analyzed for its cultural depth and historical relevance. The making of Fast X was an epic endeavor in itself, filled with ambitious planning, high-stakes production challenges, dramatic shifts in creative leadership, and moments of unexpected brilliance behind the scenes. As the 10th main entry in the Fast and Furious saga, Fast X had to carry the weight of the franchise's legacy while also paving the way for its final chapters. Behind the scenes, the film's journey from pre-production to premiere involved intricate location shoots, complex stunt coordination, global logistics, and creative tensions that eventually shaped the tone and direction of the movie. One of the most significant developments during production was the sudden departure of longtime Fast director Justin Lin. Lin, who had directed multiple successful entries in the series, including Fast 5 and F9, exited the project shortly after filming began, citing creative differences. His departure sent shockwaves through both the industry and the fanbase, and it created a temporary pause in production. Reports surfaced that disagreements over the direction of the script and dynamics between key figures, including lead actor Vin Diesel, played a role in Lin's stepping away. While the specifics remained somewhat private, Lin's exit underscored the creative pressure involved in steering a franchise of this scale. Replacing Lin was French director Louis Leterrier, known for action-packed films like The Transporter, Clash of the Titans, and Now You See Me. Leterrier stepped in with only days to prepare, inheriting an already partially constructed vision and needing to put his own directorial stamp on a film already in motion. His arrival brought a different energy to the set, with a focus on dynamic action sequences and a more grounded, character-driven tone. Leterrier emphasized practical stunts where possible and sought to give each major action beat its own emotional and thematic weight. Despite the urgency of his onboarding, he managed to stabilize the production and guide it to completion under intense scrutiny and tight schedules. Filming for Fast X spanned multiple countries and continents, reflecting the globe-trotting nature of the franchise. Key filming locations included Rome, Lisbon, London, Los Angeles, and parts of Brazil, all of which contributed unique visuals and cultural textures to the final product. The chase sequence in Rome, which became one of the movie's most talked-about action set pieces, involved shutting down major city streets and coordinating with Italian officials for weeks of night shoots. The scene included a massive rolling bomb that barreled through cobblestone alleys and historic plazas, creating logistical nightmares for the crew but delivering one of the film's most memorable moments. The production team faced numerous technical challenges during these shoots. For the Rome bomb sequence, a combination of practical effects and CGI was used to simulate destruction while preserving the integrity of the city's historic sites. Real cars were modified and destroyed, drones were deployed to capture overhead shots, and remote camera rigs allowed for low-angle chases that would have been too dangerous for human operators. The planning required for even a few seconds of screen time was immense, involving stunt drivers, special effects teams, and engineers working in concert to create the illusion of effortless chaos. Safety on set was a constant priority. Given the scale of the action, including high-speed chases, explosions, and fight scenes, the stunt team led by coordinator Spiro Rosatos worked closely with Leterrier and the cast to ensure no one was injured. Many of the actors, including Michelle Rodriguez and Jason Momoa, performed their own stunts to varying degrees, adding authenticity to the action. Rodriguez, a longtime advocate for physical realism in her roles, trained extensively for fight sequences, while Momoa embraced motorcycle stunts and water-based scenes with enthusiasm. Momoa's scenes in particular required careful planning due to their intensity and his improvisational style, which kept both the crew and fellow actors on their toes. Another fascinating aspect of production was the design and implementation of the vehicles used in the film. Fast X continued the franchise tradition of showcasing iconic cars, both vintage and hypermodern. The car department built or modified over 200 vehicles for use during filming. These included Dom's signature Dodge Charger, redesigned for greater ruggedness and outfitted with flame-resistant armor for scenes involving explosions. Several of the cars were customized to reflect the personalities of their drivers. For example, Dante's flamboyant and eccentric style was matched with vehicles featuring bright paint, gold accents, and weaponized modifications. The coordination between departments, props, vehicles, costumes, special effects, and cinematography was critical in achieving a coherent visual tone. Despite the numerous locations and constantly shifting action, Leterrier emphasized a sense of visual continuity, often using long takes and fluid camera movements to maintain immersion. The camera crew employed state-of-the-art technology, including robotic arms and stabilizers that allowed for fast movement without jitter, enabling the audience to remain oriented even during the most frenetic scenes. One of the most emotionally charged sequences behind the scenes involved the integration of Paul Walker's legacy into the film. While Walker had passed away nearly a decade earlier, his character, Brian O'Connor, remained present in the story's universe. The filmmakers chose to honor Walker's legacy respectfully, using archived footage and carefully staged narrative devices to keep his character alive without resorting to digital recreation. The decision was made with input from Walker's family and co-stars, and it reflected the deeper emotional currents that ran beneath the surface of Fast X's action-heavy plot. The dynamic between cast members also played a role in shaping the film. Many of the actors had worked together for years, developing genuine friendships and on-set chemistry that translated on screen. Off-camera, the camaraderie was evident in behind-the-scenes footage showing the actors joking between takes, supporting each other through long shoots, and sharing meals during night breaks. This bond was especially strong between Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, and Ludacris, whose familiarity brought warmth and believability to their on-screen relationships. Jason Momoa's entrance into the Fast family brought a unique energy to the set. Known for his playful, larger-than-life personality, Momoa quickly became a favorite among cast and crew. He was known to bring ukuleles to set, lead impromptu jam sessions, and lighten the mood during tense production days. His portrayal of Dante, which combined menace with flamboyant humor, required careful tonal balancing. Leterrier gave Momoa considerable creative freedom, allowing him to explore and redefine what a fast villain could be. The result was a performance that brought both shock and laughter, shaking up the franchise's traditional mold for antagonists. Fast X builds upon over 2 decades of storylines, character arcs, betrayals, alliances, and family bonds, and its plot reflects the narrative density accumulated throughout the Fast and Furious franchise. As the 10th main entry, Fast X carries the responsibility of both moving the story forward and beginning to bring the saga to a thematic and emotional resolution. Its narrative structure is complex and sprawling, featuring multiple storylines that converge and diverge across various global locations. The film's plot balances emotional stakes, personal vendettas, and adrenaline-charged action sequences, structured to both entertain and set up the franchise's impending finale. The film begins with a flashback that recontextualizes events from Fast 5, 2011, particularly the heist in Rio de Janeiro where Dom and his team dragged a massive vault through the city streets, effectively dismantling the criminal empire of Hernan Reyes. Fast X introduces Dante Reyes, the son of Hernan, who witnessed his father's death during the vault heist. This moment becomes Dante's origin story as a villain, framing his motivations around vengeance and psychological warfare rather than just brute strength. The flashback serves to root Fast X in the franchise's mythology while setting the emotional tone of the movie. It also functions as a narrative bookend, reinforcing that past actions have lingering consequences. In the present day, Dom is seen living a relatively peaceful life with Letty and his young son, Brian Little B. Marcos. This domestic calm is quickly shattered when Roman, Tej, Ramsey, and Han arrive with news of a new mission from the covert agency once run by Mr. Nobody. They are tasked with intercepting a stolen weapon in Rome, a seemingly standard operation. However, the mission is a trap set by Dante, who orchestrates a massive explosion in Rome that places the entire team under international suspicion. This pivotal sequence not only raises the stakes but also initiates a chain reaction of events that forces the team to go into hiding and Dom to take matters into his own hands. Dante's strategy throughout the film is psychological as much as it is physical. Rather than directly confront Dom and his crew at first, he systematically dismantles their support systems, isolates them, and targets their loved ones. This narrative technique creates suspense and emotional tension as the audience watches familiar characters pushed to their breaking points. Dante's unpredictability and flamboyant cruelty make him a unique antagonist. He doesn't merely want to defeat Dom, he wants to break him emotionally, humiliate him, and make him suffer the loss of control that Dante experienced in his past. The film structure alternates between multiple parallel storylines. Dom pursues Dante across various continents, attempting to protect his son while uncovering the extent of the villain's reach. Meanwhile, Letty is captured by the agency and ends up imprisoned alongside Cypher, the cyber-terrorist from previous films. Their uneasy alliance and eventual escape form a subplot that explores themes of trust, betrayal, and survival. Letty and Cypher's storyline is more contained but provides key background on the internal corruption within the agency that once offered them protection. Simultaneously, Roman, Tej, Han, and Ramsey are on the run, trying to clear their names while staying ahead of global law enforcement. Their subplot offers comic relief, bonding moments, and small victories that keep the audience engaged between the heavier dramatic beats. These scenes are intercut with Dom's emotional journey, allowing the film to balance tone and maintain narrative momentum. Each thread is designed to build toward a central convergence point, an all-out confrontation between Dom and Dante. Midway through the film, the story shifts significantly when Jacob Toretto, Dom's estranged brother introduced in F9, re-enters the narrative. Jacob has evolved from antagonist to ally and becomes the protector of Dom's son, Little B. Their journey across perilous terrain and under fire from Dante's operatives adds a paternal dynamic and injects heart into the film. Jacob's relationship with the boy becomes one of the most emotionally resonant parts of the movie, highlighting redemption, sacrifice, and the idea that family bonds can be reforged. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the agency meant to protect Dom and his team has been compromised. A new character named Amaze takes over leadership after Mr. Nobody's disappearance and is initially positioned as an ally. However, the film gradually reveals his true alignment in the climax when it's uncovered that Amaze is working with Dante, adding an element of betrayal and deepening the film's theme of corrupted institutions. The climax of Fast X occurs on a dam in Portugal, where Dante sets a deadly trap. Dom is forced to drive a weaponized car down the dam, avoiding missile fire and trying to save his son. This scene is a culmination of the film's recurring motifs: water symbolizing danger and rebirth, fire representing destruction, and vehicles acting as extensions of the character's willpower and spirit. The dam sequence is visually and narratively explosive. It is framed not just as an action set piece, but as a metaphorical trial, a final test of Dom's strength, ingenuity, and commitment to his family. Just when it seems Dom has succeeded, the film delivers a series of gut-punch cliffhangers. A plane carrying Roman, Tej, Ramsey, and Han is shot down by surface-to-air missiles, leaving their fate unknown. Jacob sacrifices himself in an act of redemption to ensure Dom and Little B can escape, further darkening the tone. Letty and Cypher, having escaped their Arctic prison, discover a new threat on the horizon. And finally, the dam begins to collapse with Dom and his son still trapped at the bottom. The film ends abruptly, with no resolution offered, a narrative decision that subverts the typical Fast franchise formula of concluding with a family barbecue or celebratory toast. This ending structure serves multiple functions. It establishes Fast X not as a standalone story, but as the first part of a larger conclusion. The cliffhanger format increases anticipation for the sequel while signaling to the audience that the stakes are now higher than ever. There's no easy victory, no safe haven, and no guarantees that every beloved character will make it out alive. By breaking from tradition and ending on a somber, unresolved note, the film positions itself as a pivotal moment in the franchise's narrative arc. Throughout the film, flashbacks and callbacks to earlier entries are strategically placed. These moments serve as both fan service and narrative reinforcement, reminding the audience of the long history that informs every decision the characters make. Dom's flashbacks to his father's death, references to Brian O'Connor, and echoes of past betrayals all contribute to the depth of the story. The film doesn't rely on nostalgia alone. It uses the weight of history to push its characters toward meaningful transformation. Pacing-wise, Fast X moves with calculated rhythm. It opens with high-intensity action, transitions into suspense and investigation, shifts into emotional territory through family-centered subplots, and ramps back up toward its climactic final act. The alternating storylines allow the audience to catch their breath between explosions, while also maintaining engagement. Fast X, as the 10th major entry in the Fast and Furious saga, is rich with recurring and evolving themes that have become foundational to the franchise. Over the years, the series has grown from a niche street racing story to a global action epic, and with that growth, its themes have expanded to explore complex emotional, moral, and existential ideas. In Fast X, the most prominent themes include family, vengeance, sacrifice, identity, legacy, redemption, and power. These are not only expressed through dialogue and plot, but also reinforced through visual symbolism and character actions. The movie weaves these themes into its narrative framework with a self-awareness that elevates it beyond standard action fare. At the heart of the film remains the unshakable theme of family. The concept of family in the Fast universe has always extended beyond blood relations to include chosen family, those whom the characters have fought with, for, and beside. In Fast X, this idea is tested more intensely than ever before. Dom's paternal relationship with his son, Little B, serves as the emotional core of the story. His protectiveness, his teachings, and his moments of vulnerability highlight what fatherhood means in a violent, unpredictable world. The scenes between Dom and Little B are intentionally quieter and more reflective, allowing viewers to see the generational impact of Dom's choices. His commitment to shielding his son from the life he has led reflects the struggle many parents face, wanting to prepare their children for the world while shielding them from its harshest realities. The theme of vengeance is primarily embodied by the antagonist, Dante Reyes. His motivations are not random or ideological, they are deeply personal. The death of his father, Hernan Reyes, at the hands of Dom and his crew in Fast 5 sets the foundation for his actions. What sets Dante apart from previous villains is the theatrical and emotional intensity of his need for retribution. He doesn't just want to kill Dom, he wants to emotionally destroy him. This extends the theme of vengeance into a psychological territory, where revenge becomes a slow-burning, manipulative force that poisons everything it touches. Dante's actions are often laced with irony and symbolic gestures, such as forcing Dom into impossible choices, staging ambushes that echo past traumas, or orchestrating events that mirror Dom's own worst fears. Closely tied to vengeance is the theme of sacrifice. Several characters in Fast X are put in positions where they must give up their safety, freedom, or even lives for others. Jacob Toretto's character arc is perhaps the most illustrative of this theme. Introduced in F9 as an estranged brother and antagonist, Jacob's transformation into a protector and surrogate father for Little B demonstrates his desire for redemption through sacrifice. His final act, which involves blowing up a convoy of enemies to protect his nephew and brother, is both literal and symbolic. It is a redemptive death, showing that love and loyalty can be reclaimed even after years of separation and conflict. Letty and Cypher's shared subplot explores the theme of identity. Forced into an uneasy alliance while imprisoned in a black site facility, the two women must reconcile their histories and question their roles in the wider conflict. Letty, who has always defined herself as a fighter for her family, is challenged to see the shades of gray in people like Cypher, who represents chaos but also a kind of freedom. This forced introspection allows Letty to explore what identity means when stripped of weapons, support, and trust. Similarly, Cypher is humanized in subtle ways, not enough to excuse her past actions, but enough to deepen her character and complicate the binary of good versus evil. Dom himself grapples with identity and legacy throughout the film. As he continues to lead, protect, and fight, He must ask himself what kind of man he is becoming and what kind of world he is leaving for his son. The past continues to haunt him, not just in the form of enemies like Dante, but through memories, regrets, and unresolved grief over friends like Brian O'Connor. Legacy becomes a central concern. What will be remembered, what will be passed on, and what must be buried. Dom's conversations with Little B, often brief, but heavy with subtext, reveal a man deeply aware that his choices will shape another life. These emotional undercurrents give the action scenes greater weight, as each explosion and near-death encounter feels like a test of whether Dom can truly change or whether he is destined to live and die by the same code he always has. Power, and its misuse, is another recurring theme in Fast X. Dante manipulates entire government systems, turns the law against the heroes, and hijacks advanced weaponry to terrorize cities. Meanwhile, the agency, once a source of structure and protection, has become compromised, symbolizing how institutions can be corrupted by internal rot. Amaze, the agency's new head, initially seems like a lawful neutral figure, but is later revealed to be allied with Dante. This betrayal reinforces the theme that power, without accountability, is dangerous. In contrast, Dom's power comes from loyalty, resilience, and conviction, not from titles or weapons, but from relationships and purpose. Symbolism in Fast X is woven into the imagery, vehicles, settings, and even wardrobe. Vehicles, as always, serve as extensions of character personalities and philosophies. Dom's Dodge Charger represents strength, tradition, and unyielding force. Dante's exotic and flamboyantly modified vehicles reflect his unpredictability and desire to stand out. Jacob's car, rigged with makeshift weaponry and adapted for defense, reflects his transformation from aggressor to protector. Each vehicle is more than transportation. It's a symbolic statement about who these characters are. Water, particularly in the dam sequence, serves as a recurring visual metaphor. It symbolizes both threat and purification. The climax on the dam, where Dom must drive down a concrete slope as missiles rain down, becomes a baptism of fire and water. The dam itself, a structure meant to contain and control chaos, begins to crumble, mirroring the emotional and moral collapse happening in Dom's world. The water that threatens to drown him and his son is both an obstacle and a metaphor for the flood of consequences, grief, and buried secrets finally surfacing. Fire is another key symbol. From car explosions to burning wreckage, fire is used not just for spectacle, but as a representation of irreversible change. It consumes, reveals, and leaves nothing the same. The fiery explosions often accompany major turning points in the film: Jacob's death, the destruction of the plane, the sabotage of Rome, suggesting that transformation always comes at a cost. Costume design and color symbolism also play a role in reinforcing themes. Dom is often seen in dark, muted clothing, reflecting his seriousness and grounded nature. Dante, on the other hand, wears brightly colored outfits, silk shirts, and accessories that stand in stark contrast to his brutal acts. His flamboyant style serves as a visual contradiction, making his violent intentions more disturbing. The contrast between appearance and reality is a subtle thematic thread. What looks harmless may be deadly, and what appears hardened may still contain vulnerability. The audio landscape of Fast X is as integral to the film's identity as its action set pieces and emotional story arcs. The franchise has always had a strong auditory identity, blending hip-hop, reggaeton, EDM, orchestral scores, and engine roars into a seamless experience that reflects its multicultural, high-octane ethos. In Fast X, the soundtrack and sound design work together to heighten emotion, drive momentum, and immerse the viewer in the high-stakes world of Dom Toretto and his family. The combination of meticulously crafted sound effects, thematically rich musical cues, and modern anthems gives the film its pulse and emotional weight. At the core of Fast X's sonic identity is its original score, composed by Brian Tyler, who has been a long-standing contributor to the franchise. His music has always aimed to balance the adrenaline of the action with the emotional depth of the characters, and Fast X is no exception. Tyler's compositions oscillate between booming orchestral swells for explosive sequences and more intimate, ambient tracks during character-driven moments. In this installment, he introduces new motifs, particularly for Dante Reyes, while evolving familiar ones for Dom and the rest of the crew. The score's leitmotifs, the recurring musical themes, help establish continuity across the narrative. Dom's theme, which has evolved over the years, is now slower, heavier, and more contemplative, reflecting the weariness and responsibility he carries. It often accompanies scenes where Dom is contemplating his next move, connecting with his son, or confronting past decisions. Conversely, Dante's theme is chaotic and unpredictable, blending distorted strings, synthetic beats, and dissonant tones. It feels both playful and threatening, a perfect match for a villain who thrives on psychological warfare as much as physical destruction. These musical signatures help differentiate character energies and underscore the emotional stakes of each scene. The action sequences in Fast X benefit immensely from the dynamic use of sound. Car chases, explosions, and fight scenes are elevated by a layered and immersive audio design. The sound team employed a wide range of techniques to capture and manipulate real-world sounds for maximum impact. For example, each car in the film has a unique audio profile, from Dom's throaty Dodge Charger to Dante's exotic performance vehicles. These sounds are not generic engine roars. They are tuned and mixed to feel personal, expressive, and true to the character driving them. When Dom revs his Charger, the low-end rumble is almost musical in its intensity, functioning as a kind of sonic signature. Spatial sound design is used effectively throughout the film. Dolby Atmos and other immersive audio formats are taken full advantage of, with sounds moving fluidly around the viewer. In scenes where cars race through tight urban environments or helicopters fly overhead, the sound follows the action with pinpoint precision. This creates a heightened sense of realism and presence. You don't just watch Fast X, you feel like you're inside it. The audience is placed in the middle of the chaos, and the sound guides the experience, helping them process the velocity, danger, and stakes in real time. Explosions and crashes are handled with a detailed layering of elements. Rather than using stock sound effects, the filmmakers created custom explosions that combine multiple types of audio: fireball roars, debris scatter, metal tearing, glass shattering, and distant echoes. The goal was to make each explosion feel unique and grounded, with weight and sonic texture. These moments are also synchronized closely with the visuals, ensuring that the audio supports, rather than overwhelms, the scene. The timing of each sonic beat contributes to the rhythm and pacing of the action. Another major audio element is dialogue mixing. With so much happening visually and sonically, it's essential that character voices cut through the noise. In Fast X, dialogue is carefully mixed to remain clear, even during chaotic scenes. The mix ensures that emotional lines land with impact, especially in moments of crisis, loss, or resolve. Vin Diesel's gravelly delivery, Jason Momoa's flamboyant taunts, and Michelle Rodriguez's firm declarations are all preserved with clarity and emotional resonance. The sound team also subtly alters the room tone and background noise during intense conversations, dropping out certain frequencies to create a vacuum that pulls focus to the character's words. Perhaps the most recognizable aspect of Fast X's auditory signature is its curated soundtrack. The film continues the tradition of using a globally influenced, genre-blending selection of tracks that mirror the franchise's multicultural appeal. Fast X features music from artists spanning reggaeton, hip-hop, Afrobeat, Latin trap, and electronic dance music. These songs are not just background music, they're woven into the scenes to elevate mood, reinforce setting, and energize the pacing. For example, the sequence in Rio de Janeiro features Latin-inspired tracks that reflect the local culture while amping up the tension and excitement. The music doesn't just serve as a cultural nod, it deepens the authenticity of the setting and gives the scene a rhythm that aligns with its emotional and narrative beats. Similarly, urban hip-hop tracks underscore several of the car chases, connecting the series back to its street racing roots and giving the film an edge that feels both nostalgic and modern. One of the standout musical moments in Fast X is during a montage of the team preparing for their next move, a signature moment in nearly every Fast installment. In this case, the soundtrack swells with a powerful blend of orchestral buildup and electronic percussion, creating a mood of determination and urgency. The song that plays over this montage feels like a rallying cry, reflecting the character's resolve in the face of mounting odds. This is where the emotional resonance of the score meets the cultural relevance of the curated tracks. Sound design is also used thematically to emphasize psychological elements. Dante's scenes often include subtle audio cues that reflect his instability and unpredictability. These might include rising string tension, offbeat rhythms, or even distorted vocal snippets layered into the background. These elements are often barely noticeable, but they add a subconscious sense of unease, making viewers feel off balance when he is on screen. The contrast between his playful demeanor and the unsettling sound design enhances his villainy without relying solely on exposition or visual cues. Quiet moments are also handled with precision. In a franchise known for bombast, silence can be just as powerful. Scenes where Dom speaks with his son, or characters reflect on lost friends, are often scored minimally or not at all. Ambient sound, wind, footsteps, distant city noise is brought to the forefront, allowing space for emotional weight. The contrast between the loud and the quiet makes both more impactful. These quieter sonic choices help humanize the characters, reminding audiences that beneath the action, there are real emotional currents. Fast X also pays tribute to its musical legacy. Certain cues and samples from previous films are subtly reintroduced, creating a sense of continuity. Longtime fans will recognize these callbacks, such as the drum rhythms used in early Fast films or the melancholic piano themes that recall moments with Brian O'Connor. Fast X, the 10th main installment of the long-running Fast and Furious franchise, arrived in theaters in May 2023 amid a storm of anticipation, skepticism, and legacy-building expectations. With 2 decades of history behind it, the film was positioned not only as another high-octane thrill ride, but also as the beginning of the franchise's grand finale arc. Given the cultural weight of the series and the star power involved, Fast X generated an enormous response from critics, fans, and industry analysts alike. The reception was predictably mixed, with reactions ranging from enthusiastic praise to outright dismissal, depending on perspective, expectations, and tolerance for the franchise's signature blend of melodrama and spectacle. Upon release, Fast X performed solidly at the global box office, grossing over $700 million worldwide. While this marked a slight dip from the series' peak entries like Furious 7 and The Fate of the Furious, it was still a significant commercial success, especially in the context of a post-pandemic theatrical landscape where many tentpole films struggled to reach pre-COVID numbers. The film's international performance, particularly in markets such as China, Brazil, and parts of Europe, helped buoy its overall financial results. The box office figures confirmed that despite critical fatigue, the franchise maintained a loyal and enthusiastic global fanbase. Critically, Fast X received a wide range of responses. On aggregator platforms, it landed with a mid-level score, suggesting a general sentiment of cautious appreciation tempered by familiar criticisms. Reviewers often acknowledged the film's technical competence, energetic pacing, and commitment to delivering crowd-pleasing action, while simultaneously pointing out its narrative excesses, formulaic plot mechanics, and increasingly implausible physics. For some critics, Fast X epitomized the franchise's greatest strengths: over-the-top stunts, emotional loyalty to its characters, and an unashamed love of spectacle. For others, it represented a creative stagnation, a film that leaned too heavily on recycled ideas and melodramatic plotting. A common praise from both fans and some reviewers was Jason Momoa's performance as Dante Reyes. Critics across the board highlighted his portrayal as a fresh injection of chaotic charisma and flamboyant menace. Unlike previous antagonists in the series who often leaned into stoic toughness or militaristic posturing, Momoa's Dante was described as theatrical, unpredictable, and magnetic. His colorful wardrobe, twisted sense of humor, and flamboyant energy made him stand out as a villain, with some labeling him the franchise's best antagonist since the introduction of Deckard Shaw. Critics appreciated the contrast his performance brought, shaking up the series' traditional tone and injecting a Joker-esque flair into the story. However, Momoa's performance also sparked minor controversy in some circles. A small subset of audiences and commentators debated whether his over-the-top style clashed with the film's more earnest emotional beats. Some questioned whether his performance bordered on caricature, undermining the seriousness of the stakes. Still, most agreed that in a series known for defying gravity and logic, his stylized approach was more fitting than not. Vin Diesel's performance as Dominic Toretto also drew divided responses. Longtime fans applauded his consistent commitment to the character's emotional gravitas and stoic leadership. They noted his chemistry with returning cast members and his ability to convey quiet intensity, especially in scenes with his son or when reflecting on fallen comrades. Others, however, criticized Diesel's portrayal as increasingly self-serious, suggesting that the character's philosophical musings and gruff monologues were beginning to feel repetitive or overwrought. Some critics felt that Dom's development had plateaued, with the character becoming more of a symbol than a person, echoing a broader critique of the film's approach to character depth. The action sequences, always a centerpiece of fast films, were generally praised for their scale and inventiveness. The Rome bomb chase sequence, the dam climax, and the armored transport ambush were frequently cited as standout moments of cinematic spectacle. Critics acknowledged the meticulous coordination of stunts, use of practical effects where possible, and the seamless integration of CGI. However, there were also remarks about action fatigue, with some reviewers suggesting that the sheer volume of destruction and chaos led to diminishing returns. In particular, critics pointed out that without a clear sense of stakes or consequences, even the most impressive set pieces could begin to feel hollow. The film's narrative structure and writing were among its most frequently criticized elements. Several reviewers noted that Fast X suffered from franchise bloat, trying to balance too many characters, subplots, and teases for future installments. With such a sprawling ensemble, some characters felt underutilized or sidelined. Letty's arc, for instance, was seen by some as disconnected from the main plot, while Roman and Tej's comedic subplot was viewed by others as filler. The cliffhanger ending, designed to set up the next chapter in the saga, also drew criticism. While some audiences appreciated the boldness of an unresolved ending, others found it frustrating or indicative of a film more focused on building a franchise machine than telling a complete story. The film's handling of legacy characters also sparked conversation. Brie Larson's introduction as Tess, a daughter of Mr. Nobody, was seen by some as a welcome addition, though her screen time was limited. Fans were divided on the return of Gal Gadot's character, Giselle, in a surprise cameo. While some celebrated her return as a long-awaited twist, others viewed it as an unnecessary resurrection that diluted the emotional impact of her previous death. These mixed reactions mirrored broader concerns about the franchise's increasing reliance on bringing characters back from the dead as a way to sustain audience interest. Critics also took note of the film's dialogue and tonal shifts. While the franchise has never been known for Oscar-worthy writing, Fast X pushed the melodrama to new heights. Some appreciated the earnestness and commitment to themes of family, sacrifice, and loyalty. Others found the dialogue overly sentimental or unintentionally comedic. The contrast between hyper-serious monologues and absurd action sequences created tonal whiplash for some viewers, though for fans of the series, this blend is part of the franchise's unique charm. From an industry perspective, Fast X was analyzed as a reflection of the challenges facing modern franchise filmmaking. The film was seen as both a testament to the durability of blockbuster series and a case study in how difficult it is to keep a long-running saga fresh. Some critics admired the film's unapologetic embrace of its identity, noting that it made no effort to appeal to those unfamiliar with or uninterested in the franchise. Others, however, saw this insularity as a weakness, suggesting that Fast X was made for fans alone, with little concern for attracting new audiences or innovating narratively. Fast X, as the 10th installment in the Fast and Furious saga, represents more than just another chapter in a long-running action series. It marks a crucial turning point in the cultural and cinematic legacy of the franchise. Since its inception in 2001, the Fast and Furious brand has evolved from a niche street racing drama into a global blockbuster phenomenon, deeply rooted in themes of family, loyalty, multiculturalism, and kinetic spectacle. With Fast X, the franchise not only reinforced its own mythos but also expanded its influence across modern action cinema, international filmmaking trends, and the way Hollywood approaches long-form franchise storytelling. One of the clearest signs of Fast X's legacy is the way it has helped redefine the modern action franchise formula. In an era dominated by cinematic universes and sprawling multi-film narratives, the Fast and Furious films were among the first non-superhero franchises to construct an interconnected world with recurring characters, overlapping plotlines, and legacy-based storytelling. Fast X, with its callbacks to earlier installments, reappearances of long-thought-dead characters, and multi-part finale structure, is emblematic of how the series has embraced serialized storytelling typically seen in comic book adaptations. This serialized structure, solidified by Fast X's cliffhanger ending and teases for upcoming sequels, has influenced how other franchises approach continuity and character development. The idea of growing an ensemble cast across a decade or more, giving even secondary characters full arcs, and weaving personal history into global stakes is now more commonplace, thanks in part to the groundwork laid by the Fast saga. While this approach isn't unique to Fast X, the film's execution and scale demonstrate how a non-superhero franchise can still wield the kind of cultural gravity and narrative sprawl that defines major studio tentpoles today. Fast X also reinforces the series' legacy of embracing and promoting multicultural representation. From its earliest days, the franchise has stood out for its diverse cast and international settings. With major characters from Latin America, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, Fast X continues this global vision. The film moves across continents, from Italy to Brazil to Portugal, without positioning any one culture as exotic or secondary. It treats global diversity as the norm, not a gimmick, and this has helped cement its reputation as a truly international property. In many ways, Fast X's influence is especially potent in global markets. The film was designed with international audiences in mind, from its casting choices to its location shoots to its soundtrack. This approach has contributed to the franchise's massive overseas appeal, particularly in regions like Latin America, Southeast Asia, and China. As a result, Fast X has helped shift Hollywood's attention toward global storytelling, encouraging more studios to craft narratives and cast ensembles that appeal across borders and languages. The box office returns for Fast X once again proved that the international market is not just supplemental, it's essential to the modern blockbuster formula. Another legacy element solidified by Fast X is the elevation of automotive action to a distinct and respected subgenre. While car chases and stunts have long been part of action cinema, the Fast and Furious series has turned them into a signature art form. With Fast X, the franchise reaches new heights in terms of stunt design, vehicular choreography, and visual spectacle. The Rome bomb sequence, in which Dom redirects a giant explosive orb through city streets, has already become one of the most talked-about action set pieces of the decade. These sequences continue to influence how other films portray car-based action, not merely as transitional moments, but as climactic events that advance the plot, reflect character decisions, and create visual metaphors for control, chaos, and risk. Fast X has also continued the franchise's legacy of creating unforgettable villains. Dante Reyes, portrayed by Jason Momoa, offers a different flavor of antagonist, flamboyant, theatrical, psychologically manipulative, and deeply personal in his vendetta. His performance echoes the kinds of complex, larger-than-life villains seen in superhero cinema while offering a fresh take that could inspire future filmmakers to think beyond stoic or militaristic bad guys. Dante's success as a character may influence how antagonists are crafted in future action films, less grounded in brute force, more in layered personality and unpredictability. In terms of franchise management, Fast X represents a unique case study in longevity. Few film series last this long with sustained financial success, and even fewer manage to retain audience interest across multiple generations. Fast X pays homage to its past while setting the stage for its future, bridging the nostalgia of longtime fans with the excitement of new viewers. Its decision to bring back characters like Giselle, played by Gal Gadot, and tease the return of Luke Hobbs, played by Dwayne Johnson, shows a commitment to closing narrative loops and revisiting beloved dynamics. This approach has set a standard for how franchises can balance fan service with fresh storytelling. Another key aspect of Fast X's legacy is its contribution to redefining masculinity and emotional vulnerability in action cinema. While earlier installments leaned more heavily into macho posturing and stoic heroism, Fast X and recent entries have placed increasing emphasis on fatherhood, grief, trust, and emotional reckoning. Dom's relationship with his son serves as the emotional core of Fast X, showing a man who balances immense strength with sensitivity and sacrifice. This evolution reflects changing societal expectations around masculinity, and the franchise's willingness to embrace emotional complexity has helped expand the emotional vocabulary of action heroes in general. Merchandising and brand expansion are also notable parts of Fast X's influence. Beyond the film itself, the franchise continues to generate interest through video games, collectibles, car partnerships, fashion collaborations, and themed attractions at Universal Studios. The release of Fast X was accompanied by a new wave of merchandise targeted at both older fans and younger viewers, ranging from die-cast models and apparel to branded tech accessories and beverage promotions. The movie's success in maintaining relevance across product categories reflects how deeply embedded the franchise has become in global pop culture. Fast X's influence even extends into the realm of filmmaking logistics and production philosophy. The film, with its sprawling cast and multiple international shoots, exemplifies the modern blockbuster's collaborative, multi-unit approach. Directors, second-unit teams, stunt coordinators, and visual effects artists all contributed to a production that was less the vision of a single auteur and more the result of a well-managed creative machine. This model, refined over successive installments, has been adopted by other studios managing franchise properties with large ensemble casts and global appeal. Fast X, as the 10th core installment of the Fast and Furious saga, represents a culmination of 2 decades of cinematic spectacle, emotional storytelling, and cultural resonance. While critics may view the film through the lens of narrative coherence, action choreography, or cinematic technique, the audience response to Fast X tells a more profound story, one that speaks to connection, nostalgia, aspiration, identity, and the need for belonging. Audience reflections and interpretations reveal the deeper psychological and emotional layers behind the seemingly bombastic and exaggerated film. This installment struck a chord with its viewers not only through adrenaline and action but through the shared language of family, loyalty, and resilience. Across generations, Fast X resonated with a wide spectrum of viewers. For those who grew up watching the franchise from the early 2000s, the film served as a time capsule, transporting them back to the roots of the series. The continuity of characters, particularly Dominic Toretto, Letty Ortiz, Roman Pierce, and Tej Parker, created a sense of narrative consistency and emotional investment. For many in their 30s and 40s, watching Fast X was less about watching a movie and more about reconnecting with a piece of their own youth. The scenes referencing the events of Fast Five or the return of Giselle evoked not only narrative callbacks but personal memories, reminding audiences of their own journey alongside these characters. The intergenerational nature of the Fast franchise played an important role in how Fast X was interpreted. Younger viewers, introduced to the saga through more recent entries like Furious 7 or The Fate of the Furious, found Fast X to be a gateway into deeper lore and character dynamics. The presence of the next generation in the storyline, particularly Dom's son, Little Brian, added another layer of relatability for younger fans and for parents watching with their children. It symbolized the idea of legacy, not just within the film but among its viewership. Parents who once admired Dom's fierce loyalty and edge-of-your-seat bravery were now reflecting on how those values translated into their own real-life roles as caregivers, protectors, and providers. Audiences around the world often interpreted Fast X as more than just an action movie. In various fan communities, forums, and social media platforms, the film was celebrated for its emotional depth hidden beneath the muscle cars and explosions. Viewers pointed out that, despite its larger-than-life action, Fast X touched on universal human themes: the grief of loss, the trauma of betrayal, the strength of forgiveness, and the complexity of familial bonds. The fact that a film so saturated with stylized violence and fantasy stunts could still elicit tears in scenes involving Dom and his son, or Letty and Cypher confronting their shared pain, speaks volumes about how the audience internalized these stories. In particular, Dom's unwavering devotion to his family struck a deeply emotional chord with many viewers. Whether protecting little Brian, remembering those he has lost, or facing overwhelming odds, Dom represents a form of idealized strength and loyalty that resonates with audiences facing their own life challenges. For some, he's a symbol of the selfless protector. For others, he represents endurance in the face of unimaginable hardship. Many fans have expressed how the character's values helped them through personal struggles, including the death of loved ones, broken relationships, or difficult family dynamics. It is not uncommon to find stories online from viewers who drew strength from the film's messages, sometimes even quoting Dom's dialogue as inspiration. For marginalized audiences and underrepresented groups, Fast X's continued commitment to diversity was interpreted as empowering and affirming. The multicultural cast, with prominent roles for Latinx, Black, Asian, and Middle Eastern characters, provided visibility that remains rare in action franchises of similar scope. The fact that Fast X didn't tokenize these characters, but rather wove their identities seamlessly into the fabric of the narrative gave many viewers a sense of belonging. They weren't just watching action heroes, they were seeing versions of themselves on screen. Women, too, found connection in characters like Letty, Ramsey, Tess, and even Cypher, complex, strong, and central to the plot rather than sidelined. The film's refusal to conform to traditional Hollywood beauty standards or gender roles was applauded by viewers who saw themselves reflected in these portrayals. The film's tone, oscillating between serious emotional moments and over-the-top sequences, was embraced by fans as part of the unique Fast formula. While some outsiders may see this as tonal inconsistency, devoted audiences interpreted it as a necessary balance, allowing space for both laughter and grief, joy and vengeance. This duality made Fast X feel emotionally accessible and cathartic. It gave viewers permission to be emotionally invested in a story that also entertained them, showing that even in exaggerated circumstances, human emotions remain real and valid. The film's portrayal of brotherhood and chosen family resonated deeply with viewers who may not have traditional families of their own. The bond between Dom and his crew, people from vastly different backgrounds united by loyalty, was interpreted by many as an aspirational model of modern kinship. In a world where blood ties are not always supportive or safe, Fast X offered a vision of family defined by trust, shared experience, and mutual sacrifice. Many LGBTQ+ viewers, individuals estranged from their biological families, or those rebuilding new support systems found inspiration in the way the film treated friendship as family. The mantra, "family is more than blood," echoed throughout social media discussions, fan art, and personal anecdotes. Dante's role in the film also prompted intense viewer interpretation. Some saw him as a manifestation of chaos and grief left unchecked, a mirror for how trauma can turn into violence when left unresolved. Others viewed him as a necessary disruption to Dom's seemingly invincible life, forcing the characters to confront their pasts and reckon with their actions. For certain viewers, Dante represented unpredictability and flamboyance in a space often dominated by straight-faced machismo. His style, mannerisms, and twisted charisma gave rise to numerous discussions about masculinity, queerness, and the boundaries of villainy in modern cinema. While interpretations varied, what united audiences was the strong impression he left, a sign that this character would linger in the cultural conversation long after the credits rolled. Fast X also invited reflections on mortality and legacy, especially with the inclusion of little Brian as both a literal and symbolic next generation. Viewers interpreted Dom's journey not just as a hero's mission, but as a father's duty to prepare the world, and himself, for what comes after. Many found this theme resonant in a post-pandemic world, where questions of survival, continuity, and generational responsibility feel more urgent than ever. The tension between protecting the present and shaping the future was a core emotional through-line for viewers reflecting on their own lives, children, and responsibilities. Fast X continues the legacy of the Fast and Furious franchise by pushing its characters into new emotional and psychological territory. After over 2 decades, the core cast is no longer just a collection of archetypes or action figures. Each major character in Fast X is given a specific arc that explores their growth, identity, motivation, and evolving relationships. With a cast spanning returning legends and newer additions, the film uses its narrative to deepen personal stakes, confront buried traumas, and test the boundaries of loyalty. This installment highlights the tension between who these characters have been, who they've become, and who they must choose to be in the face of escalating threats. At the center of Fast X is Dominic Toretto, whose arc takes on more introspective and paternal dimensions. While Dom has always been the emotional anchor of the series, Fast X places greater emphasis on his role as a father. His relationship with little Brian is not a subplot. It's the emotional core of the story. Unlike previous films where Dom's loyalty to his crew or his romantic partners drives the narrative, here it is the protection of his son that dictates his decisions. This shift allows Dom to reveal a more vulnerable side. We see a man constantly measuring his actions against the legacy he wants to leave behind. His arc revolves around reconciling the life of violence and retribution he's led with the peaceful future he wants to offer his child. His past, particularly the sins of Fast Five, resurfaces through the antagonist Dante, forcing Dom to confront whether his prior actions can ever be truly separated from his present identity. Dom's growth is also reflected in his increasing willingness to lean on others emotionally. While he's still the stoic leader who takes burdens upon himself, Fast X shows subtle changes in how he communicates with Letty, Mia, and even adversaries like Cypher. He's more open about fear, regret, and the limits of his strength. In a particularly powerful moment, Dom tells little Brian that it's okay to be scared. That line, simple as it is, symbolizes a man who's finally embracing emotional honesty, a departure from the hardened warrior introduced in the early films. His arc is about transformation through love, fatherhood, and self-awareness. Letty Ortiz's journey in Fast X continues her evolution from rebellious street racer to battle-hardened partner and protector. Letty has always walked a fine line between fierce independence and unwavering loyalty. In this film, she is confronted not just by external enemies, but by the internal question of what kind of life she wants to lead. Her time in the covert medical facility, particularly her forced alliance with Cypher, becomes a crucible for self-reflection. Initially, Letty resists working with her old enemy, driven by understandable rage over past betrayals. But as the two women are pushed into survival mode, Letty begins to see the shades of gray in their conflict. She realizes that, like herself, Cypher is also a product of loss and manipulation. Letty's arc involves overcoming black and white thinking, recognizing that trust can sometimes be a necessity rather than a luxury. The Letty-Cypher dynamic is one of the most complex in the film. These two women have been on opposite ends of past battles, but Fast X forces them into a reluctant alliance that reveals how much both have endured. Letty does not forgive Cypher, but she does begin to understand her. This emotional shift is subtle, yet significant. It marks growth in Letty's worldview and her capacity to compartmentalize rage for the sake of a greater good. Her final escape with Cypher doesn't signal friendship, it signals maturity and strategic wisdom. Roman Pierce and Tej Parker, usually the comedic relief, are given more responsibility and autonomy in Fast X. Roman's arc centers around leadership. Given command of the crew during their mission in Rome, Roman finds himself out of his depth. He tries to emulate Dom's tactical instincts but quickly realizes that leadership is more than bravado and self-confidence. His mistakes in judgment lead to near-catastrophic consequences, forcing him to confront his own insecurities. The film does not ridicule Roman for his shortcomings, it humanizes him. His desire to prove himself stems from a genuine love for his family and a longing to be more than the jokester. This arc adds layers to Roman's personality, showing that beneath the quips is a man yearning for purpose and recognition. Tej, on the other hand, maintains his role as the tech genius but also becomes the emotional counterbalance to Roman. Where Roman acts on impulse, Tej brings logic and grounding. Their banter remains intact, but the film gives them moments of sincerity. In a rare scene, Tej tells Roman that being a leader isn't about being right all the time, it's about taking responsibility when you're wrong. This interaction marks a milestone in their friendship, elevating it from comic relief to meaningful camaraderie. Their survival through the airborne escape and their brief moment of reflection afterward show that even secondary characters in this franchise have room for growth and depth. Han Lu, the fan-favorite character resurrected in earlier films, continues his quiet arc of healing and reintegration. While Han doesn't get as much screen time in Fast X, his presence is symbolic. Han represents the past, the pain, the betrayals, the ghosts of Tokyo. His calm demeanor is a contrast to the chaos around him, but this doesn't mean he's fully at peace. There are moments in Fast X where Han appears contemplative, as if still processing the resurrection of his own life and purpose. His budding flirtation with Ramsey hints at a man slowly reopening his heart. Han's arc is less about dramatic transformation and more about quiet endurance. He's a man who's seen death, betrayal, and redemption, now trying to find something resembling normalcy in a world that rarely allows it. Ramsey, as the team's hacker and strategist, continues to assert her presence within the group dynamic. Fast X develops her role from being a tech-side character into a more emotionally grounded team member. Her interactions with Tej and Roman suggest a deepening sense of belonging. She also plays a crucial role in executing the team's missions, proving that intelligence and logic are just as valuable as physical strength. Her arc involves embracing risk and vulnerability, stepping out from behind the screen and into more direct action. This growth reflects her increasing confidence and her desire to be more than just the tech girl. One of the most surprising and emotionally charged arcs belongs to Jacob Toretto, Dom's estranged brother. Introduced as a villain in F9, Jacob's redemption arc reaches its poignant peak in Fast X. Now fully integrated into the Toretto family, Jacob is portrayed as both protector and uncle. His dynamic with little Brian is heartwarming, offering a side of him previously unseen. He is playful, nurturing, and willing to sacrifice everything for his nephew. Jacob's death, though sudden, is framed as an ultimate act of redemption. He chooses to lay down his life to give Dom and little Brian a chance to survive. This act, more than any dialogue or flashback, completes his arc from outsider to family. Jacob becomes what he once resented, a Toretto who leads with love. The costume and set design of Fast X play a critical role in shaping the film's tone, grounding its larger-than-life action sequences in vivid visual storytelling. While Fast and Furious films have always been known for their kinetic energy, exotic cars, and global settings, Fast X takes these signature traits and elevates them through more refined visual choices. Costume and set design in this installment do more than dress up the world. They help define character identities, reflect psychological states, hint at social status, and enhance narrative arcs. This integration of style and substance ensures that every piece of clothing and every set location serves a deeper storytelling function. Starting with Dominic Toretto, his costume design remains rooted in consistency, echoing his symbolic role as the grounded core of the franchise. Dom wears classic dark tones, typically black or navy tank tops, jeans, leather jackets, and boots. These choices reflect his practical nature, physicality, and no-nonsense persona. But beyond function, Dom's clothing is also emblematic of permanence. As chaos and betrayal unfold around him, Dom visually remains the same, representing the unchanging anchor of loyalty and tradition. In Fast X, even subtle shifts, like Dom wearing more protective gear in scenes involving little Brian, serve as quiet acknowledgments of his dual role as fighter and father. These design cues support his character evolution without requiring dialogue. Letty Ortiz's wardrobe in Fast X is carefully curated to reflect her internal conflict. Her signature biker chic look, composed of leather jackets, combat boots, fingerless gloves, and muted tones, remains intact but is updated with sharper silhouettes and sleeker fabrics. This shift suggests that Letty is not just a fighter, but a tactician, someone who has grown more deliberate and less impulsive. Her costume during the prison escape sequence, where she's in a black tactical suit, also symbolizes a crossing of thresholds. It blends utilitarian practicality with covert elegance, reinforcing her role as both warrior and survivor. Her makeup is kept minimal throughout the film, maintaining the grounded realism of her character. Every outfit she wears allows for mobility, hinting at her readiness for conflict at any moment. Cypher's visual presentation is a striking contrast. Her costume design embodies control, sophistication, and intimidation. Unlike Dom and Letty, who wear rugged clothing for survival, Cypher's attire is often clean, futuristic, and sharply tailored. In scenes where she is negotiating or manipulating others, she wears high-collared jackets or asymmetrical tops in icy colors like silver and steel gray. These choices reflect her calculated mindset and psychological detachment. Her minimalist yet high-tech fashion sensibility aligns with her hacker origins and her need to be seen as emotionally impenetrable. Her look is more curated than functional because for Cypher, perception is a weapon. Even her slicked-back hair and flawless presentation are tools of psychological dominance. Yet in Fast X, subtle shifts, like disheveled hair and bloodied clothes after a fight, signal moments of vulnerability, chipping away at her once impervious image. Jacob Toretto's wardrobe undergoes perhaps the most emotional transformation in the film. In F9, Jacob was often dressed in dark, militaristic clothing, symbolizing his alienation and internal bitterness. In Fast X, as he embraces his role as uncle and redeemer, his clothing softens. We see him in light-colored shirts, casual jackets, and even humorous t-shirts during scenes with little Brian. These choices reflect his reintegration into the family and his attempt to find peace. His costume in the final scenes, a hybrid of tactical gear and civilian wear, visually represents his dual identity, still a fighter, but now fighting for something pure. His costume arc ends with a sacrifice, and his departure in full combat gear signifies a final act of service and atonement. Roman Pierce and Tej Parker, known for their flamboyance and banter, are dressed to reflect their contrasting personalities. Roman's costumes lean into flashy, ostentatious choices, designer sunglasses, bright sneakers, and gold accents. His wardrobe reflects his constant need for attention, but also his desire to project confidence, especially when feeling insecure. Tej, in contrast, dresses with understated cool, muted colors, sleek athletic wear, and functional accessories. His wardrobe reflects precision, control, and quiet confidence. The two characters' costume differences serve as a visual metaphor for their personalities: fire and earth, comedy and logic, flair and functionality. Ramsey, the crew's tech expert, wears a wardrobe that blends comfort with style. Her outfits are modern and tech-savvy, often featuring layers, cargo pants, and jackets with multiple pockets. These designs suggest readiness and adaptability. She also occasionally dons more feminine elements, such as scarves or jewelry, subtly asserting that intelligence and femininity can coexist in an action-dominated world. Ramsey's style represents a new generation of action heroines, fashion-forward, but never impractical. Han Lu, the quiet observer of the team, maintains his signature laid-back style: button-down shirts layered over t-shirts, earth tones, and understated footwear. His wardrobe is never loud but always composed, reflecting a man who prefers to stay in the background yet is always in control. In Fast X, his clothing carries more warmth: light browns, khakis, and soft fabrics, signaling emotional healing and a step away from the trauma of his past. His clothing acts like armor, not against bullets, but against emotional exposure. Little Brian, though a child, is also carefully costumed. His wardrobe consists of simple, practical clothes, mostly athletic wear or comfortable gear suitable for movement. But even these choices are symbolic. His clothes often match or echo his father's tones, reinforcing the father-son bond. In some scenes, his outfits include miniature versions of Dom's style, a tiny leather jacket or a black tank top, suggesting the inevitable legacy he inherits. Now turning to Dante Reyes, his costume design is among the most theatrical and symbolic in the film. Unlike most villains who choose dark, utilitarian clothing, Dante's wardrobe is colorful, flamboyant, and expressive. He wears silk shirts in purple and gold, flowing scarves, custom-tailored pants, and designer boots. His fingernails are painted, his jewelry excessive, and his hair often untamed. All of this is deliberate. Dante uses his appearance to unsettle, confuse, and assert dominance in unconventional ways. His flamboyance hides cruelty, and his elegance masks instability. In a world of stoic heroes, Dante's style screams disruption. His wardrobe tells the audience, "I am not like them, and I don't play by their rules." Each of his outfits is a piece of performance art, blending intimidation with flamboyance, reflecting his unpredictability and his need to reclaim attention and power. The set design of Fast X is equally layered, designed to evoke emotional tension, global scope, and symbolic meaning. The film travels across multiple locations: Rome, Los Angeles, Brazil, Portugal, and more, and each setting feels uniquely crafted. The Rome sequence is built around ancient ruins and winding cobblestone streets, contrasting the modern chaos of car chases with historical grandeur. The dialogue and scriptwriting in Fast X represent a culmination of the franchise's evolving voice, one that blends action-packed momentum with heartfelt emotion, humor, and the mythic weight of a saga that has spanned over 2 decades. While Fast and Furious films are often characterized by their high-octane stunts and adrenaline-fueled sequences, the script plays an equally important role in shaping tone, character depth, and narrative propulsion. In Fast X, the script balances franchise callbacks, emotional stakes, comic relief, and escalating tension with surprising efficiency. Though at times criticized for melodrama or implausibility, the writing also delivers sincerity, catharsis, and memorable lines that resonate with both diehard fans and casual viewers. At the heart of the screenplay is the theme of legacy, and this is woven not just into plot lines, but into the language characters use. Dominic Toretto, the emotional center of the film, continues to speak in phrases that are short, declarative, and weighty. His lines rarely contain more than 10 words, yet they land with the force of a freight train. A single line like, "You don't mess with family," or "The streets always remember," carries layers of subtext, not only reinforcing Dom's moral code, but also anchoring the franchise's central philosophy. The script uses Dom's speech as a kind of moral compass, and though the dialogue can be sparse, it is dense with emotional and thematic weight. This minimalist dialogue for Dom contrasts with the verbose, chaotic speech patterns of Dante Reyes, the film's antagonist. Dante's lines are theatrical, poetic, and sometimes unhinged. He speaks in riddles, taunts, and metaphors, often breaking into mockery or flamboyant turns of phrase that mask his deeper trauma. The writing here serves a psychological purpose. Dante uses language to destabilize, confuse, and unsettle his opponents. For instance, in a key confrontation, he says something like, "I'm not a villain. I'm divine retribution wrapped in velvet and vengeance." This kind of line is excessive by design. It paints Dante as someone who sees the world as a stage and himself as its most tragic and dazzling actor. His dialogue is laced with religious and mythological allusions, further building the impression that he sees himself not merely as an enemy, but as an avenging force of justice. Letty Ortiz's dialogue remains rooted in pragmatism. She is blunt, passionate, and emotional in bursts. Her lines often reveal inner conflict and unspoken wounds, especially in conversations with Dom or Cypher. The screenwriters give her moments of vulnerability, particularly during her incarceration, where her toughness gives way to expressions of fear, anger, or betrayal. Her dialogue rarely meanders. She speaks when it matters, and often with sharpness. A simple line like, "We've been through worse, but this feels different," conveys both her endurance and apprehension. It's the economy of words, combined with Michelle Rodriguez's performance, that gives Letty's dialogue power. Cypher's speech, by contrast, is cool and intellectual. She talks with precision, always weighing her words as weapons. The script positions her as someone who speaks only when necessary and never without purpose. She rarely raises her voice, but her words cut deeply. The contrast between Cypher's surgical calm and Dante's flamboyant chaos becomes a source of tension in scenes where both are present. Their dialogues reflect their differing ideologies. Cypher believes in logic and control. Dante thrives on emotion and spectacle. Roman Pierce and Tej Parker provide the film's comic relief, and their dialogue is fast-paced, improvisational, and reactive. Roman's lines often veer into exaggeration, boasting, and over-the-top metaphors. He may say something like, "Man, we're basically superheroes at this point," which reflects the franchise's growing self-awareness. Tej counters with sarcasm and grounded logic, often pulling Roman back into reality. Their verbal sparring is rhythmic and musical, providing levity during moments of high tension. The screenwriters allow these characters space to riff off each other, almost like a buddy comedy embedded within a high-stakes action thriller. This interplay adds dimension and accessibility to the film, reminding audiences that even in a world of spies, bombs, and betrayal, there's room for humor. Hanlu's dialogue is marked by quiet wisdom. He doesn't say much, but when he does, his lines often reflect a deeper philosophical outlook. Lines like, "Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones inside you," are not just throwaway aphorisms. They reflect a man who has suffered loss and returned from death, now viewing life through a lens of detachment and observation. His words ground the film in emotional reality. The dialogue for Little Brian, Dom's son, is carefully written to strike a balance between childlike innocence and emerging bravery. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it's usually to ask simple but powerful questions like, "Why do the bad guys hate us?" Or, "Are you coming back?" These lines may seem simple on the surface, but they evoke a sense of intergenerational trauma and the burden of legacy. His questions provide moments for the audience, and Dom, to reflect on the consequences of a life spent in danger. A particularly strong aspect of the script in Fast X is its use of callbacks and continuity references. The writers make deliberate nods to past installments through repeated phrases, flashbacks, and character-specific language. When Dom says "ride or die," it's more than a catchphrase. It's a line charged with history, referencing Letty's near-death experiences, Brian O'Connor's absence, and the emotional glue that holds the crew together. These recurring lines function almost like poetic refrains, grounding the larger-than-life narrative in emotional familiarity. Exposition is another scriptwriting challenge that Fast X handles with mixed success. In a film with such a large ensemble and sprawling plot, there is a constant need to provide background, context, and mission briefings. The film uses briefings, tech explanations, and villain monologues to deliver information quickly. While some of this can feel heavy-handed or rushed, the dialogue often incorporates humor or emotion to keep it engaging. Ramsey, for instance, often explains complex cyber scenarios, but her tone remains light and sarcastic, preventing the exposition from feeling too mechanical. Pacing of conversations is also worth noting. Fast X uses rapid dialogue during action buildups and slower, emotionally weighted exchanges during moments of reflection or loss. One example is the quiet conversation between Dom and Letty before they're separated, where both speak in hesitant, clipped phrases, signaling emotional uncertainty. The silence between their words says just as much as the lines themselves. Contrast that with the scene in Rome, where dialogue overlaps with movement, instructions, and banter, building kinetic momentum before an explosive chase. The script also plays with genre conventions. There are moments of self-aware dialogue that subtly acknowledge the franchise's implausibility. A character might quip, "We've done a lot of impossible things, but this is next level," which both pokes fun at and affirms the film's over-the-top stakes. These moments of meta-awareness are not overused, but they provide just enough winking at the audience to maintain a shared understanding that Fast X lives in a heightened reality. The marketing and promotional campaign behind Fast X was as expansive and high-octane as the film itself. With the franchise entering its 10th main installment and gearing toward its final narrative arc, Universal Pictures spared no effort in crafting a global marketing strategy that would generate anticipation across demographics, age groups, and geographic regions. From teaser trailers to international partnerships, product tie-ins, experiential events, and viral social media tactics, the promotional machine behind Fast X was a masterclass in blockbuster film marketing, designed not only to fuel box office success, but also to solidify the cultural footprint of one of Hollywood's most lucrative franchises. The first and most impactful step in the marketing campaign was the release of the official trailer. The initial teaser dropped months ahead of the film's release, with an extended 3.5-minute spot that promised audiences emotional stakes, returning favorites, and a brand new villain in Dante Reyes. This trailer was designed to appeal to both longtime fans and newcomers. It leaned heavily on nostalgia, showcasing iconic moments from earlier films, such as flashbacks to Fast Five, while hinting at new and ambitious action sequences, like the giant flaming orb rolling through the streets of Rome. The combination of explosive visuals and emotional callbacks helped the trailer trend on multiple platforms within hours of its debut. Trailer premieres weren't confined to YouTube alone. Universal organized global trailer events, including a large-scale launch in Los Angeles, where cast members attended a fan meet-and-greet alongside a street racing-themed celebration that featured real-life cars inspired by the franchise. These live events were live-streamed and shared across social media platforms, allowing international audiences to feel connected to the rollout. The emphasis was on experiential engagement, turning promotional material into immersive fan experiences. Character posters were another major element of the campaign. Each core character received a personalized poster with a dramatic tagline and stylized imagery. Dom Toretto's featured him gripping a crucifix, backlit in shadows, with the word legacy stamped across the design. Dante's poster was colorful and chaotic, showcasing his flamboyant personality and unpredictability. These posters were strategically released one at a time over several weeks, generating speculation and keeping online engagement steady. Fans shared, edited, and memed the posters, turning them into a kind of social media event in themselves. Social media played a pivotal role in Fast X's promotion, particularly on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Cast members, including Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, and Jason Momoa, were active in the promotion, posting behind-the-scenes footage, character moments, and teasers to keep the hype alive. Universal also launched official movie accounts that shared interactive content, countdowns, fan art, and clips from press junkets. A TikTok challenge tied to the film's soundtrack encouraged fans to participate in dance routines or stunt-inspired movements, further expanding its reach among younger audiences. Fast X also partnered with several global brands to extend the movie's presence beyond the theater. Dodge, a longtime collaborator with the franchise, launched special edition muscle cars that reflected Dom's signature vehicle style. Other partnerships included campaigns with energy drink companies, athletic apparel brands, and even a luxury watchmaker that designed a Fast X-themed timepiece. These tie-ins were not just surface-level promotions, but thematic extensions of the film's brand identity, emphasizing speed, performance, power, and family loyalty. One unique aspect of the Fast X promotion was the embrace of fan culture. The campaign acknowledged and incorporated fan theories, memes, and social media commentary into its strategy. Memes about Dom's invincibility or the recurring motif of family were turned into winking nods in official posts, often with playful captions or short video edits that leaned into the humor. Rather than avoid the exaggerated reputation the franchise has developed, the marketing leaned into it, presenting Fast X as self-aware, bold, and proudly over the top. Experiential marketing was another core tactic. Pop-up events were held in major cities like Los Angeles, New York, London, Sao Paulo, and Tokyo. These events feature replica cars, VR stunt simulators, meet and greets with stunt coordinators, and interactive exhibits that let fans join the crew through personalized digital experiences. Some events even allowed fans to step into a recreated garage or heist sequence using AR and VR tools. These immersive activations extended the Fast X brand into real-world spaces and deepened fan engagement. In the weeks leading up to the premiere, Universal launched a series of short documentaries and cast interviews titled Fast Legacy, which aired on streaming platforms and social media. These mini-docs explored the journey of the franchise, highlighting key characters, emotional milestones, and cultural moments across the previous films. By framing Fast X as the beginning of the end, the marketing positioned the film not just as a movie, but as a cultural event, something that fans would want to experience collectively. Television and digital advertising also played a significant role. Commercial spots aired during major sporting events, award shows, and international broadcasts. These spots were strategically edited to highlight different aspects of the film. Some emphasized action, others family drama, others comedic banter. This segmentation allowed the campaign to target different audience segments: teenagers looking for excitement, adults invested in the long-running saga, and even parents familiar with the franchise from its earlier days. In terms of merchandise, the Fast X campaign launched an expansive range of products. These included die-cast car models, collectible figurines, themed apparel, limited edition Lego sets, and digital items in mobile games. A special Fast and Furious video game update coincided with the movie release, allowing players to drive vehicles inspired by the film scenes. This multi-platform merchandising approach helped establish Fast X not just as a film, but as a lifestyle brand. Press tours were global and featured appearances by cast members on major talk shows, podcasts, and YouTube channels. Notably, Jason Momoa became a standout promotional figure, often charming interviewers with his theatrical, humorous, and energetic presence. His ability to oscillate between menace and charisma reflected his character's tone and helped generate interest even among audiences unfamiliar with the series. These interviews were carefully timed to release in the lead-up to the premiere, building a crescendo of public interest. Advanced screenings and critic previews were limited, likely to preserve key plot twists and surprises. However, fan screenings were hosted in major cities with free giveaways and surprise appearances by cast members. These early screenings generated word-of-mouth buzz, much of it shared across social media in the form of first reactions, reviews, and scene breakdowns. Influencers, movie bloggers, and pop culture commentators received early access and branded merchandise, ensuring a steady stream of online content tied to the film. Fast X stands as a pivotal entry in the Fast and Furious franchise, and to fully appreciate its place within both the series and the broader action genre, a comparative analysis is essential. By examining Fast X alongside its predecessors, similar films, and other works by director Leterrier, we gain insight into its tonal shifts, narrative evolution, stylistic choices, and its distinct approach to storytelling. Beginning with its direct predecessors in the Fast and Furious saga, Fast X carries forward the franchise's trajectory toward grander spectacle and heightened emotional stakes. Compared to early installments like The Fast and the Furious, 2001, or Too Fast, Too Furious, 2003, which were grounded largely in underground street racing and car culture, Fast X expands the universe into a sprawling international espionage thriller. This evolution mirrors the broader trend of long-running franchises expanding their scope, but Fast X takes it even further with world-spanning locations, complex villain motivations, and larger-than-life action sequences. While the early films had a raw, gritty feel with a focus on car modifications and close-knit communities, Fast X embraces operatic action, CGI-enhanced stunts, and mythic storytelling. The tone shifts from grounded realism to something closer to superhero epics. Narratively, Fast X leans heavily on themes of legacy, family, and redemption, a through-line that has been growing more prominent since Fast and Furious 7. This thematic consistency strengthens the film's emotional core but also distinguishes it from some earlier installments that prioritized adrenaline over sentiment. The inclusion of Dom's son, Little Brian, and the emphasis on past sins and generational trauma create a more layered narrative than the mostly straightforward heist or race plots of earlier films. In this regard, Fast X aligns with franchise entries like Fast and Furious 7 and The Fate of the Furious, which deepened character arcs and injected family drama alongside high-octane action. When compared to other large-scale action franchises such as Mission, Impossible, or James Bond, Fast X carves out a unique niche. Unlike Mission, Impossible, which often centers on espionage and intricate plot twists, or Bond films that emphasize suave sophistication and gadgets, Fast X thrives on its emotional resonance and the importance of chosen family. The action set pieces in Fast X are more grounded in vehicular stunts and physicality, despite the increasing use of CGI, whereas the Bond franchise relies on exotic locations and high-tech spycraft. Fast X also distinguishes itself with its focus on street racing culture and urban grit, even as it expands into international heists and warfare. The film's balance of heartfelt moments and explosive sequences sets it apart from the often more detached or formulaic tone of these other franchises. Stylistically, Fast X showcases director Leterrier's signature flair for kinetic action and visual storytelling, marking a tonal shift from his previous works. Leterrier, known for films such as The Incredible Hulk, 2008, and Now You See Me, 2013, brings a heightened sense of urgency and spectacle to the Fast and Furious universe. Compared to his earlier, more grounded or mystery-oriented films, Fast X offers Leterrier a canvas to blend superhero-style sequences with street-level grit. His handling of large ensemble casts and rapid pacing reflects his experience with crowd-driven narratives. However, Fast X demands a broader emotional range than some of his previous work, requiring careful balancing of dramatic and comedic moments, a challenge Leterrier meets with varying degrees of success. The film's visual style also bears his influence, with slick camera work, dynamic framing, and sharp editing that contribute to its relentless energy. In contrast to earlier Fast and Furious installments directed by Justin Lin, such as Fast and Furious 6 and Furious 7, Fast X introduces a somewhat different directorial voice. Lin's entries were praised for their balance of character development and action, and their ability to ground explosive sequences in emotional context. Leterrier's approach leans more heavily on spectacle and high-energy visuals, occasionally sacrificing subtlety for impact. This shift is apparent in Fast X's action set pieces, which are often larger and more elaborate, but sometimes less tightly integrated with the narrative. Nevertheless, Leterrier maintains the franchise's core emphasis on family and loyalty, ensuring continuity despite stylistic differences. The screenplay of Fast X can also be compared to earlier franchise scripts as well as to action blockbusters like John Wick or Mad Max: Fury Road. Unlike John Wick, which employs minimalistic dialogue and hyper-stylized violence, Fast X features more dialogue-driven emotional beats and a sprawling cast. The script balances humor, sentiment, and exposition, whereas John Wick focuses primarily on mood and visual storytelling. Compared to Mad Max: Fury Road, which is almost entirely action with sparse dialogue and a relentless pace, Fast X incorporates quieter moments and character interactions that deepen the stakes. This blend positions Fast X somewhere between emotionally charged blockbuster and crowd-pleasing spectacle. In terms of character development, Fast X builds upon the rich tapestry of its ensemble cast. Characters such as Dom Toretto, Letty Ortiz, and Roman Pierce have evolved over multiple films, each with their distinct narrative arcs. This long-term development contrasts with standalone action films that introduce new characters with limited backstory. The franchise's commitment to continuity allows Fast X to explore legacy themes more meaningfully, including the weight of past choices and the responsibilities of leadership. New characters like Dante Reyes add fresh dynamics, but are crafted within the established emotional framework, a technique that both honors and reinvigorates the franchise. Fast X also differs from many other big-budget action franchises in its cultural diversity and representation. The franchise has long been celebrated for its multicultural cast and its celebration of global street cultures. This inclusivity sets it apart from many traditional Hollywood blockbusters and is carried forward in Fast X with characters from varied backgrounds and locales. The film's international settings, ranging from Italy to Latin America, are not mere backdrops but integral to the story's texture, enhancing its appeal worldwide. Another key point in this comparative analysis is the franchise's evolving relationship with technology and spectacle. Early Fast and Furious films relied heavily on practical effects and real car stunts. By the time of Fast X, the blend of practical effects and CGI has become seamless, but also more conspicuous. Compared to films like The Matrix or Transformers, which push the boundaries of visual effects, Fast X strikes a balance that prioritizes believable physics within its heightened reality. The film's visual effects, while elaborate, are often grounded by physical performances, keeping the action visceral and tangible. In comparison to reboots and spin-offs within the franchise, such as Fast and Furious Presents, Hobbs and Shaw, Fast X returns to the core ensemble and narrative threads. The spin-offs tend to adopt a more comedic or standalone tone, focusing on individual characters and smaller-scale stories. In contrast, Fast X is a culmination, threading together multiple character arcs and past plotlines.